What happens when the gods themselves break the natural order they're meant to protect? Today, we're diving into one of Greek mythology's most unsettling tales, where divine power collides with forbidden desires, creating a tragedy that would echo through the ages. In ancient Greece, storytellers understood that even the gods weren't immune to human weaknesses. These myths served as powerful warnings about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of natural boundaries. The Greeks believed that when divine beings violated cosmic order, the consequences would be swift and terrible. High atop Mount Olympus, among the pantheon of Greek gods, ruled Aeolus, the master of the winds. Unlike Zeus with his thunderbolts or Poseidon with his earthquakes, Aeolus commanded something far more subtle, yet equally powerful. Every breeze that rustled through olive groves, every gale that filled sailors' sails, every hurricane that could destroy entire cities, all answered to his divine will. Aeolus wasn't just any minor deity. Zeus himself had granted him dominion over the winds, making him keeper of the floating island of Aeolia. This mystical realm drifted through the Mediterranean, surrounded by bronze walls that rose high into the clouds. From this celestial fortress, Aeolus controlled the weather patterns that determined the fate of mortals below. The wind god lived in splendor with his wife Enarete, and together they had 12 children, 6 sons and 6 daughters. These weren't ordinary divine offspring. Each child possessed aspects of their father's power over air and storm. They grew up in paradise, surrounded by luxury and divine privilege, never knowing want or hardship. But isolation, even in paradise, can breed dangerous ideas. Cut off from the mortal world and other divine families, Aeolus made a decision that would doom his entire bloodline. He decided that his children should marry each other, pairing each son with a daughter, creating 6 incestuous unions within his own family. In Aeolus's mind, this arrangement made perfect sense. His children were divine beings, superior to mortals and even to many other gods. Why should they dilute their bloodline by marrying outside the family? Why share their incredible powers with strangers when they could keep everything within their perfect circle? The wind god convinced himself that normal rules didn't apply to his family. After all, hadn't Zeus married his sister Hera? Didn't many of the Olympian gods engage in relationships that mortals would consider taboo? Aeolus believed his divine status placed him above natural law, so the marriages were arranged. Brother married sister in elaborate ceremonies held high above the clouds. The bronze walls of Aeolia echoed with wedding songs, while winds from across the world gathered to witness these unions. For a time, it seemed as though Aeolus had created the perfect divine dynasty. The couples lived in magnificent palaces carved from cloud and starlight. They commanded lesser winds and spirits, ruling over vast territories of sky and storm. Their children, born from these incestuous unions, possessed even stranger powers, abilities that seemed to twist and corrupt the natural order of things. But the gods of Olympus were watching. The Fates, those ancient sisters who weave destiny itself, had already begun spinning threads of doom for Aeolus's family. What the wind god saw as divine perfection, the cosmic order recognized as a dangerous violation of natural law. The first signs of divine displeasure came subtly. Storms that Aeolus's children commanded began to turn chaotic, refusing to obey their masters completely. Winds that should have brought gentle rain instead brought destructive hail. The very air around Aeolia began to feel thick and oppressive, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. Then the real punishments began. The children of these incestuous unions started manifesting terrible afflictions. Some were born with powers they couldn't control, creating devastating storms with their very breath. Others developed madness that made them turn their wind powers against their own family members. Canis, one of Aeolus's daughters, fell into a forbidden love affair with her own brother Macareus, beyond even the marriages their father had arranged. When Aeolus discovered this additional transgression, his rage shook the very foundations of his floating island. The wind god, who had encouraged incest within his family, suddenly couldn't tolerate this particular violation. In his fury, Aeolus sent Candace a sword, demanding she take her own life to restore honor to the family. The tragic princess, torn between love and duty, chose death rather than face her father's continued wrath. Her suicide sent shockwaves through the family, marking the beginning of their ultimate downfall. Aeolus, devastated by his sister's death and unable to live with the guilt, soon followed her into the underworld. Their deaths created a cascade of tragedy throughout Aeolus's bloodline. The other incestuous couples began to turn on each other, their relationships poisoned by jealousy, madness, and divine curse. The children born from these unions grew increasingly unstable. Some developed the ability to create tornadoes with their emotions. Others could summon lightning storms when they felt anger. But they couldn't control these powers properly. Their abilities became weapons turned against their own family, destroying the very paradise Aeolus had tried to create. One by one, the wind god watched his children destroy themselves and each other. Storms raged constantly around Aeolia as the family descended into chaos. The bronze walls that had once protected their paradise now trapped them in a prison of their own making. The other Olympian gods observed this destruction with a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. Justice had been served, but at a terrible cost. Even Zeus, who had initially granted Aeolus his power over the winds, felt compelled to intervene before the family's madness could spread to the mortal world below. Aeolus himself began to lose control of his own powers. The winds that had once obeyed his every command now reflected his internal turmoil. Gentle breezes became violent gusts, while hurricane-force winds would suddenly die to complete stillness. The natural order that he had violated was now violating him in return. The floating island of Aeolia started to descend toward the earth, its magical properties failing as the family's divine essence corrupted itself. What had once been a paradise above the clouds was becoming a cursed realm that threatened to crash into the mortal world. In the end, divine intervention was required to prevent complete catastrophe. The fates themselves had to step in, weaving new destinies for the surviving members of Aeolus's bloodline. Some were transformed into winds themselves, doomed to blow across the earth without form or rest. Others were banished to the underworld, where their corrupted powers could no longer harm the natural world. Aeolus retained his position as master of the winds, but his power was diminished and constrained. No longer could he act without oversight from the other Olympian gods. His remaining children were scattered across the world, forbidden from gathering together again. This tragic tale serves as one of Greek mythology's most powerful warnings about the dangers of violating natural order, even for divine beings. The Greeks understood that certain boundaries exist for good reason, and that power without wisdom leads inevitably to destruction. The story of Aeolus's incestuous children reflects ancient concerns about family structure, proper relationships, and the responsibilities that come with great power. It reminds us that even gods must respect the natural laws that govern existence, and that attempts to place oneself above these laws will ultimately result in downfall. Modern psychology recognizes the wisdom embedded in this myth. Healthy family structures require appropriate boundaries, and the violation of these boundaries can indeed lead to psychological and social destruction. The ancient Greeks intuited truths about human nature that we're still exploring today. This myth has influenced countless works of literature and art throughout history. From Renaissance paintings depicting the winds as tragic figures to modern novels exploring themes of family dysfunction and divine punishment, Aeolus's story continues to resonate with audiences who understand that power without wisdom is ultimately powerless against the forces of justice and natural order.